Easter comes from an ancient European goddess. Goddess of the dawn, her name was Estra by the Anglo-Saxons and Ostera by the Germanic peoples. So the goddess was well known. Her name means movement towards the rising sun. It is related to the Indo-European root word aus, which means to shine, and the English words estrus and estrogen are also derived from her name. She was considered the goddess of the growing light and spring, associated with fertility and birth. One story has her entertaining children by performing a trick that changed her pet bird into a rabbit. Then this rabbit then laid colored eggs that she gave to the children. The symbols and practices of Easter that we celebrate today are the same of our ancestors 4,000 years ago. The date of Easter, as you know, moves each year. It's the first Sunday following the vernal equinox full moon. The vernal equinox signifies the astronomical arrival of spring and was considered the time to celebrate the rebirth and renewal as nature resurrects itself from the death it suffered in the winter. The sun that died at Yule, the winter equinox. The winter solstice is reborn at this time. Speaking of Easter, we have to have a little Easter bunny story. The Easter bunny had a close call, but all is well, all is well. There's this guy who was driving along and he wasn't watching what he was doing. And then the Easter bunny came crossing the road right in front of his car and he swerved and he hit the Easter bunny. And the Easter bunny was lying there, seemingly dead in front of him and lifeless. And the man was just petrified. Oh my God, he killed the Easter bunny. Not a good legacy for anyone. So a lady pulled over and asked him, well, what's wrong? What's wrong? And he says, oh my God, I think I just ran over the Easter bunny. The Easter bunny's dead. She said, don't worry. I know exactly what to do. So she ran back to her truck. She opened it and she got out a spray can. And she walked over to the bunny and she sprayed the bunny all up and down, forward, backward, around, everywhere, and so on. Before you know it, miraculously, the Easter bunny came to life. Yay! It jumped up, waved at the two humans, and then hopped off down the road. It was about 50 yards down, and it turned around, and it waved again, and then it hopped along, and then turned around another 50 yards, and it waved again, and it just kept going back 50 yards and waving until you could hardly see the Easter bunny anymore. Well, the guy was astonished, and he said, what's in that spray can? And the woman showed him the label, and it said, hairspray. Restores life to dead heart. Restores life to dead hair. And adds permanent wave. You have any trouble with your Easter bunny? You know what to do. The title of my talk today is Transformation Happens. And it does happen. It's when we go from the lesser in order to embrace something higher. It's when we let go of our humanity and embrace our spirituality. The great spiritual work of everyone, of all of us, is to incorporate that Christ mind in our soul and in our body. It's the process of eliminating old consciousness, old ways of thinking, and entering into a new consciousness, into new ways of thinking and being. In other words, when we become one with God, when we feel that oneness and we feel that Christ consciousness moving in and through us. Jesus Christ is the human example. He's the way shower for us, moving into that state of oneness with one. He said, the Father and I are one. And he exemplified that in his life. This is not just the journey, though, of one man, Jesus. It's the journey of every man and every woman as we evolve into a greater awareness and consciousness of who we are, that we are one with God, one with Spirit, one with all. Our journey is to become illumined to these truths and to really comprehend them and live them. It's for us, can be an awakening, a birth, a rebirth, if you will, as we come into really understanding and resurrecting from the passing of that which is old and the embracing of that which is new, enabling us to really understand and know our true nature. You know, many people have the idea that getting a better knowledge of God means, well, giving up things that they'd rather not give up. One little girl said, well, I need to take up religion later on when I'm older, but I want to enjoy myself for a while first. This, of course, is to miss the point, okay? Because what we want to give up and what we are invited to give up are the things that are no longer meaningful for us. Our selfishness, perhaps our fear, the belief in the necessary limitation of any kind. Above all, one has to sacrifice the belief that there is any power or endurance in evil other than the belief that we hold that is true. If we can sacrifice that, if we can let those things go, well, then we can have the greatest time ever in our lives. Resurrection is not always a word that we use in common day language, or that we oftentimes may think about in relationship to our own lives. And maybe it even is something that we figure, well, I have not experienced this. But on closer examination, we've all experienced it. And some of us may even be experiencing it right now, even though we might call it by another name. We've all known someone, or maybe it's ourselves, whose hopes and dreams have been shattered, and yet they have the courage and the faith to pick up the pieces to make a new start. Perhaps it's overcoming a past abuse that devastated your life, or waking up to those destructive patterns that are repeating over and over again in your life and you wish to let them go. Or when we find ourselves in the valley of the shadow. Perhaps it's bankruptcy, perhaps it's divorce, perhaps it's the death of a loved one, and yet we come through it. Maybe struggling, we move to the light, to a new day. That is resurrection. And sometimes we might just need to call it that, as we resurrect ourselves into a new way of being. It's a light that returns to us after being in a period of darkness. And it's that which enables us to motivate us, to rise from that which is no longer serving us, that which is dead within us, and opening to something new, something greater. We evoke the spirit of resolution or resurrection when we are of the mind to say, I'm going to live again, I'm going to start anew, I'm going to make a change, I'm going to move into a new sense of self. And we make up our minds that we are no longer going to be stuck in what is perhaps a feeling of defeat or the depths of despair. It's like being born again, like squeezing through the birth canal. When we are born, as tough as it is, as tough as it may be, we evolve into an awareness and a consciousness of what life is all about. Now, what if we have that spiritual birth? A spiritual birth where, yes, sometimes we have to squeeze through the canal of life. But that spiritual birth comes forth, and it is a new awareness and consciousness of life. Our human birth is the metaphor for our spiritual birth, if we enable ourselves to open up to it. And yes, there's change that comes with transformation. And a lot of us are kind of resistant to change. There was a woman who bought a plaque at a garage sale. She was very excited. And it said on there, prayer changes things. She thought this was so important and so absolutely wonderful that she hung it right above their fireplace mantle. A few days later, the plaque was gone. And she asked her husband, "What did you do with the plaque?" He says, "I threw it out." She says, "Why? Don't you believe in prayer?" He says, "Yes, of course I believe in prayer. I'm just not ready to change right now." So sometimes we don't necessarily want to change, and sometimes we don't even ask to change, but it comes forth, and it comes forth within our lives. And in fact, sometimes change happens to us. We say, "I didn't ask for that. This wasn't in my mind. I wasn't thinking about this. And why did this happen to me?" Because there is a spirit that's within us that's calling us to rise above, to rise forward, to resurrect from that which may be dead in us. And sometimes we need that reminder, whatever it may be, that call from within that enables us to step into something new, something empowering, something that is rich and rewarding and spiritual. So to be transformed is to change. Throughout this Lenten series, I've asked you to really look at yourselves, to maybe look at your life, to look at the things that you might change, that you might let go of, that you might release, that you might sacrifice. Although those things are those things that no longer serve you, that keep you small, that keep you in a smaller state. And sometimes, yeah, but I like it small. Okay? The thing is, the spirit within you does not. There's a spirit within you that's calling you to be bigger, to be greater, to be wonderful, to be the magnificent being that you are. And so that will keep calling you and calling you and calling you. And sometimes it creates that inner battle within us. I don't want to change, but I'm being called to change. I don't like this happening to me, but it is happening to me. Things in our life keep happening, and you wonder, what is going on? Why am I called to change? Because that is what it is about. That spirit, that Christ consciousness within us that's calling us to be greater, to step up. And yet we fight ourselves in that regard. Sometimes it's an inner battle. There was a certain guy who lived, and he hated his wife's cat. He absolutely hated it. So they finally decided he would get rid of it. He worked up a scheme. He drove out to a park with the cat about 20 blocks from the house, and he let it out. Well, just as he was returning home, there was the cat walking up the driveway. Well, that didn't work. So the next day he drove out 40 blocks, and he headed home. But driving up his driveway, there was the cat. So he kept taking the cat out further and further and further, and still every time he would come home, there would be the cat. So he worked out a new plan. He decided he would drive, like 20 miles away. So he turned right, and then he turned left, and then he went past a bridge, and then he went right again, and then he went left again and right again. He just did all kinds of crazy turns here and there, or whatever, and he said, this time I know it's a really safe distance away from the home. So he took the cat out and he let it go. Hours later, the man calls home and asks his wife, "Is the cat there?" She says, "Yes, why do you ask?" Totally frustrated now, the man shouts, "Well, put him on the phone. I'm lost and I need directions." Now, metaphorically, what might that cat be in your life? Sometimes we need to get lost in order to be found, or to find our way, or to know that we are indeed lost. Sometimes we aren't aware that we are even lost, and so we might need that cat to remind us. We need to be no matter what the circumstances are, to open up to that light of God and to enable it to help us move forward and move up and rise above into something else, knowing that in fact miracles do happen. Jesus didn't save the day. He paved the way for us. He was a leader, he was a teacher, an example, and he paved a new way for us in an evolution of consciousness. He rose to that higher level of consciousness, knowing, I and my Father are one. The sacred life journey is a trip that we all take. It's sacred because we are consciously connecting with our spirit, we're discovering our power, and enables us to really connect with our divinity and our oneness with all things. We're on that journey, whether we are aware of it or not, and we are called to rise into it, to wake up to it, to step out of the tomb of darkness and realize who we are. The real teachings of Jesus are keys to life. The most important thing was not about his death, but about his life. What he lived, what he taught. He said, I have come that you might have life, and that you may have it in all your fullness. And that's the call. That is the call. How often do we refuse that invitation? Today is a day when we are reminded that we can accept that invitation and let our life bloom in greater and greater color. God's desire is that we are renewed daily, and our willingness to do that through the renewal of our mind enables us to really understand the deeper meaning of Easter. We've heard this quote so many times, but it encapsulates the Easter message. Don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Opening your mind to new ideas, to rise above your limitations, to let go of the past and the present if need be. Today can be a new day at every level of our being, spiritually, mentally, physically. It's a matter of consciously becoming cause to the effect. The universe is ready, willing, and able to do its part. Are you? So Easter is just not a historical event that happened 2,000 years ago. It's happening daily. It's happening right now. And so the invitation is, let us rise up in consciousness and come forth